Welcome to another Hawkeyed with me, Dave O'Hara. Pleased to be joining you this week again. Sean Bock, back for more. We have Sean on regularly, as you know, during this 6-year run of Hawkeyed on television, and always enjoy Sean's insights. He's with 24/7 Sports, CBS Sports, the Hawkeye beat writer. Sean, it's recruiting time, commitment day. We pushed it back to this show recording. Usually we record on Tuesdays. Today we're recording on Wednesday afternoon, December 3rd. We also wanted to wait for the Michigan State Iowa men's basketball game last night. So first and foremost, as always, thanks for joining us. And secondly, how's everything going with you, my friend?
Yeah, Dave, it's going well. Appreciate it. It's been a couple busy last few weeks, but it's kind of slowing down a little bit more now with the with the recruiting class being finished and the football season ended. So, but now it's going to pick up again with basketball, women's basketball, and then bowl prep is always big, and kind of seeing what happens with the transfer portal and stuff too, even with the window pushing back. So, it's been hectic, but it's been good. That's always a good sign of being busy.
Yeah, it's fantastic to see all the great things happening in and around Iowa City in all sports. A great fall for women's soccer, field hockey, volleyball had a winning campaign for the first time in a handful of years. They finished their regular season. Now, of course, football after the Nebraska shellacking. Hawks win 40-16 in Lincoln. Let's you and I talk recruiting real quick. Any high points? I know one of the numbers you put out, am I right on this? Almost half, or 8 of the 17 signees on commitments today were 4-star. So 8 of 17. Is that number correct, Sean?
Yeah, that sounds about right because there's so many different like grading scales and whatnot. I think we had 7 or 8 at 24/7, but it's a really good class. I think we talk a lot about the transfer portal and just the importance of those prospects. But I think we tend to forget some of the high school recruits that Iowa has brought in the last couple of cycles. And you saw it against Nebraska too. There were a number of notable sophomores and freshmen that made an impact in that game. And that kind of just speaks to the Iowa staff and kind of just how they're able to place a real focus on the high school classes because obviously the transfer portal is going to be a big focus. That's going to be kind of just where everyone goes because you want that instant impact. You need those instant impact pieces to fill those holes. But you look around some of those guys, I mean, a number of Iowa's key players were developed through the high school ranks and guys that Iowa was able to bring in high school. The entire Iowa secondary, the linebacker corps, the defensive line for the most part outside of Jonah Pace and Bryce Hawthorne. The entire offensive line was guys that Iowa developed, that George Barnett was able to develop through. The running backs, there are a couple of transfers here and there, wide receiver, but if you're Iowa, your program, you're going to thrive on getting guys from the high school ranks and, having these guys in your system and being able to develop them throughout their careers because that's, kind of what you depend on. You don't really have the money that some of these other programs have to, kind of just throw at these guys to get these instant impact guys, high profile guys. You got to be able to develop. And Iowa does a great job of that. And you really saw kind of the fruits of that labor earlier this week or last week against Nebraska. And you started to see more and more of that development throughout the year too. And yeah, it's a good class for sure because you're slowly stacking these classes. Like you saw the 2025 guys make an impact against Nebraska, and there's guys more that are coming up the wings. There's a number of talented 2024 guys too that I think could really, be impact guys next year as well. And you take into account the 2027 or the 2026 class, there's a window there for Iowa to kind of go get over that hump a little bit that they haven't been able to really get over the last couple of years. And with the expanded college football playoff too, like I know we talked so much on the show, just like the margin for error, how small it was this year, and just like how small that gap was from Iowa winning two or four or like 2 or 3 more games. If you can have the talent to get over the top and do that, like I think this class and these classes, you continue to stack them together, you put yourself in a pretty good position if you can fill some of these holes in the portal as well the next couple of years.
John, highlighted by the offensive line signings, but a lot of in-state, primarily some of the high-profile guys. We talked about Luke Brewer a couple weeks ago, reclassifying and being an early commit out of the Des Moines area, Norwalk to be specific, tight end. But let's talk about Julian Manson a little bit. You got an offensive lineman from Cedar Falls. Both of these guys had committed a while ago, but it's nice to make it official. Talk a little bit about those couple of guys, if you would, please, for us, Sean.
Yeah, Carson Nielsen out of Waterloo West is a really big offensive lineman. Physically looks the part. I think he's probably one of more Iowa's like more impressive looking offensive linemen that they've landed in the last couple of cycles, dating back to Tristan Wirfs. I really think he's kind of in that not talent category because Tristan Wirfs was kind of in a league of his own with that, but from a physical standpoint, he looks the part of that. He's gonna have to really improve technique, continue to, kind of put more mass on the frame and get used to kind of being in Iowa's run blocking schemes, pass blocking schemes, because his technique is not fully there. But man, from a physical standpoint, like he looks the part. There's a reason why Wisconsin, Penn State, Tennessee really wanted him, and Notre Dame and Alabama were really looking at him too. And then Julian Manson, that's another guy that just checks so many boxes in terms of how he looks from a physical standpoint. And I think from a production standpoint, just like how he plays, he's farther along than Nielsen is, and you saw that at Iowa City West, making plays at the linebacker position, how much, space he can cover, how much range he has, his ability to make plays in space, and, also his ball skills too on the offensive end. He was a really productive receiver for Iowa City West the last couple of years. And I had a couple of people tell me when he, or like you watch him play when he was a junior in high school, and you just think to yourself, man, that's a future Big Ten linebacker. Like that just looks like a guy who's going to start at Iowa for multiple years. And obviously, it was a recruitment that helped that Iowa had his dad on staff, Jason Manson, who works with the quarterbacks. Um, but it was a battle. Miami really wanted him. Kansas State really wanted him. But Iowa was able to keep him home. But yeah, those are two guys where, it's not necessarily instant impact guys, but the development and the upside for all of them is really encouraging.
It's nice to hear your great reporting. And of course, folks, as you know, Sean is the recruiting specialist for CBS Sports, 24/7 Sports. So we always like to get a little bonus nugget from Sean. But now, Sean, that's great to look at the future. We got to talk briefly about the past week, and then we'll move forward into bowl prep and where you think the Hawks might be going. But what a game in Lincoln. First quarter didn't look as good for the Hawks, even starting off right away. They started off in a hole behind. But Sean, they got into that second, third, and fourth gear, and look out, 40-16 Hawkeye win. How about that?
Yeah, it was kind of just a complimentary win. Like everything was kind of clicking for Iowa. Nebraska was able to get off to a nice start, and you kind of think to yourself, oh boy, this is going to be one of those games again. And I think everybody kind of predicted that this game would end up in the teens, or it would be a pretty close game, or one of those games where it's just weird stuff happens. And I mean, they weren't wrong. Like the special teams plays, some of the things that happened. Caden Weechin had a really nice return. Mark Gronowski probably had his most efficient game as a Hawkeye from a passing standpoint, and his legs were really crucial as well. The defense was able to come up with some big stops, really tame Emmett Johnson in the second half. But man, oh man, he was carving up the Iowa defense in that first half. There was no way that they were going to stop him. But yeah, it was kind of just a culmination of just everything that's happened this year. I feel like, Iowa is in a different and a much better spot than, say, some of the teams that, are their rivals, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Nebraska, but they're still like this game just spoke to me about how like they're just in the middle. Like it feels like they're in the middle of where they kind of, were and like where they need to be because, there's that we talked so much about how the games this year, the losses this year, like they were just so small, some of the mistakes that were made and ended up, being the deciding factor in the game. And this game kind of, continued to show me that Iowa is ahead of those, Big Ten West programs or those former Big Ten West rivals, or rivals now still. But they're just one step below that next echelon of where they need to get to, kind of reach that next level and kind of be that team that's competing for a college football playoff spot.
Let's you and I talk bowl prep in reference to the Iowa Hawkeyes. Are they going to Tampa, do you think? That seems to be the consensus, or will they sneak out and go to Vegas? Where are Hawkeye fans going to be heading? The announcement, of course, is on Sunday, December 7th, as we record this on Wednesday afternoon, December 3rd. We're strictly taking a guess here, or an educated guess. But Sean, at 8-4 overall, 6-3 in the Big Ten, tied for sixth, or depending on tiebreakers, sixth place in the Big Ten, where finishing in the top third, where do you see the Hawks potentially going for a bowl?
Yeah, I think Quest is probably the spot where they're going to end up
In
right now. I
Tampa.
think that, yeah, in Tampa. Yep. I think that game against Nebraska, that win against, or that game in general, the Heroes game was kind of the one that people were waiting for to see who from the Big Ten would represent Iowa. But it'll be interesting to see who plays Iowa. I don't know if I know a couple projections have had Vanderbilt, but I think that was more so if they had lost at Tennessee. Um, I wouldn't want Iowa to play Missouri again. Um,
It might be
I don't know.
Tennessee again, I'm hearing too. So who knows?
Tennessee would be an interesting one. But yeah, I think Tampa is kind of the route where things are looking like right now, and that's a quality bowl game. Like I know it's obviously not the college football playoff, but I think that's a bowl game where you kind of you have a chance to prove yourself against an SEC foe, and continue to get that momentum. I mean, we've seen the last couple of years how Iowa's been able to struggle against these SEC teams, most notably that Tennessee. Um, was that the Citrus Bowl? I think that was, right? Yeah. I mean, we saw kind of the gap that Iowa has from some of these even like kind of mid SEC teams. I think this Iowa team has more of a chance to compete against a team like Tennessee, no matter kind of who the pieces that they have on that roster. But it'll be interesting to see who kind of opts out, who doesn't, who wants to play, who doesn't really decide to play. And that'll ultimately have a say on it because these bowl games just don't have as much juice to them as they used to, which stinks. But it's kind of the reality of where we're at with college football. But I think if you can close out the year strong, get a win in Tampa, that's a pretty good momentum builder going into the transfer portal cycle.
Absolutely. I've said this many times on this show, multiple times with you, but it bears repeating. Iowa, one of four teams in major Division I college football, one of four teams with Alabama, Ohio State, and Georgia, and now Iowa. Four teams, only four teams, to have 8 wins in the last 10 consecutive seasons. So from 2015 to this year, the Hawks with another 8-win season. Be nice to get that ninth win in the bowl. As Sean, as you mentioned, he is Sean Bock. I am Dave O'Hara. Sean, of course, beat writer covering the Iowa Hawkeyes for CBS Sports 24/7 Sports. I am Dave O'Hara. This was Hawkeye. We'll be back with more in just a few moments.
Hawkeye is brought to you by BettorEdge, your ultimate social betting marketplace. With no VIG, you're bound to win more on every bet on BettorEdge. Founded by Hawkeye alum James Siles and proud Iowan Greg Kieski, BettorEdge delivers an unmatched betting experience. Plus, what's not to love when they're committed to supporting charities and children's hospitals near you? Join the action now. Sign up at bettoredge.com/Hawkeye and get $10 to start winning more today. BettorEdge, where your social betting means your bets go further and you win more.
Welcome back to Hawkeye with me, Dave O'Hara. Pleased as always to have Sean Bock joining us. He's kind enough to join us for the whole show today. Just took a deep dive into Hawkeye football with recruiting and then where the bowl prospects are in this 8-4 season for the Hawkeyes, overall 6-3 in the Big Ten. Now, Sean, let's transition to men's basketball, and then we'll talk briefly about women's basketball to close out the show. Tough one last night in East Lansing, Sean. The Hawkeyes went in there undefeated, 7-0. Michigan State was undefeated.
Yeah, this Michigan State team is legit. Like it has the type of roster that Tom Izzo seems to want. I mean, he's got that tough, heady point guard, and Jeremy Fears Jr. He's got guys on the inside that are really skilled. Could probably use a little bit more shooters, but they were able to hit some shots yesterday against Iowa from the outside. But yeah, it was a big welcome to the Big Ten moment. I think some of the things or some of the issues that we've kind of had with this Iowa team going back to the offseason have really come to light the last couple of games. I don't want to put too much of the, blame on Bennett Sturts in terms of, oh yeah, he's like carrying the load too much because we saw what he did against Ole Miss. But you got to have other guys step up too. Like I think guys like Tavion Banks and Alvaro Fulgaris really have to be more impactful in those types of games, especially on the glass. I think when you look at what makes Michigan State so good is that you'll have a long possession defending them, and you're like, okay, like it's a sigh of relief. Like we forced them to get a tough shot off. Our job is done. But no, they're going to attack the glass or the offensive glass harder than any team in the country. I think they're seventh in the country in rebounding rate on or offensive rebounding rate after last night's game. And I think they had like 20 something second chance points and, 13 or 14 offensive rebounds. And, one of the issues that we kind of said coming into this season was Iowa was going to struggle consistently on the glass against teams like that. And they didn't have a secondary guard option or another guy who can kind of create for himself outside of Bennett Sturts. And kind of just interior play too as a whole has been, a little bit concerning. I think Michigan State was 13 of 17 at the rim. Iowa was 7 of 13. They've really struggled at the rim the last couple of games too, dating back to the Acrisure series. So those have kind of been some of the issues that this team has faced this year. And I still think they had some positive moments yesterday against Michigan State. I thought there were a couple of times in the first half where maybe one or two shots or one or two things go Iowa's way, it could have been a different game. Like I think there was a time where Iowa was up down 9 in the second half or in the first half, and there was a 6 point swing where all of a sudden, Michigan State's up 13 or 15. And you're kind of like, oh boy, like, you have to be able to get some of those plays that in order to avoid those swings. And then the second half too, I thought offensively, like things were working better. They were getting to their second, third actions. In the first half, they weren't able to get to those second, third reads with their sets and their different, schemes that they use and the different actions that they use. But in the second half, they were able to do that more, and you saw more of that offensive flow. You saw more of that cohesion. You saw more of those good shots at the rim. You saw their guards getting downhill, like Cale Combs. Bennett really wasn't in for much of those, or he wasn't, as much of a factor because, they were so focused on him and playing off him, or playing on him, and kind of, playing more straight up against Iowa's other offensive players. But you saw more of that, cohesion, kind of that flow and pace that we talk about with Ben McCollum's team in the second half. But, they just weren't able to get the shots to go down. I mean, 7 of 23 from three, 7 of 13 at the rim. Like for a team that puts so much emphasis on those two parts of an offensive attack, you got to be better than that, especially against teams like Michigan State. And Michigan State's a really good team. Like I said, they've been tested early on. They've had some really good wins. Like those wins against North Carolina and Kentucky are legit. Arkansas is a pretty good team too. Um, but Iowa really hasn't been tested to that point, and you got to be able to withstand the physicality. And you saw a gap in just size, like strength and experience in the Big Ten. And I thought Iowa just kind of looked uncomfortable as a whole against Michigan State's pressure and kind of the ability to create outside of Sturts. He kind of saw one guy, like it would always just kind of be one pass to Bennett would pass it away, and then they get it like immediately back to him. Like no guy really seemed comfortable attacking. And you need more of some of these other guys to step up, like I said before. But it's early in the year. Ben McCollum addressed that. He goes, "Hey, it's still early in the year. Like we know we're going to get better." But definitely some of those concerns that we had about this Iowa team coming into this year have kind of come to light the last couple of outings.
Sean, and getting out rebounded 38-17 or 37-18, more than 2-1 rebounds. We figured that would probably happen, and Jess Settles is going to join me on next week's show, former Hawkeye great and current Big Ten Network broadcaster and ESPN Network's broadcaster or analyst. And we've talked about that. He's talked about playing at Michigan State, 30 plus years ago, what to expect from a Tom Izzo team. And doesn't shock me that they got out rebounded 37-18. So 2-1, more than 2-1. I like what Ben McCollum said is, hey, we got rolled. We know it. We got beat soundly, but we're going to get better. I think that was the resounding comment was, we're going to get better. So again, I'm not okay with losing, Sean, but I love the attitude of, okay, now we got to get better right now. And that's the only attitude you can take after a shellacking like that.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, Maryland's gonna be a tough foe. I mean, they've played some pretty quality opponents. They got beat pretty bad by Alabama, um, and Gonzaga, and I think they lost to Georgetown by 10 too. So they've been tested as well, and they got some good pieces on their team. Farrell Payne, who I think a lot of people remember from his Minnesota days, he's a tough matchup. Darius Adams is a freshman wing who's really good at attacking off the bounce and can hit the three a little bit. And Buzz Williams, he's always kind of known for having that up in your face type defense, and it's gonna be another battle. It's definitely gonna be another battle. But I mean, from a metric standpoint, and I mean this Maryland team too, they want to attack. They want to attack you. They want to do what Michigan State does in terms of getting to the free throw line, getting those chances at the rim, and they've been doing a pretty good job at converting on those as well. So it's gonna be a tough battle. But yeah, Iowa State's gonna like I look at Iowa State and I look at Michigan State, and there's not like a ton of great comparisons with that team, but there are some comparisons with how they blitz ball screens. They're going to be really aggressive in blitzing those ball screens. They have some good size, some good versatility down low, guys who can protect the rim really well. They defend the three-point line really well too. They have a really good point guard in Taman Lipsey, and you're on the road in Hilton, which is not an easy place to play. So you're going to run into some of the same issues that you had against Michigan State, and you have to be able to avoid having some of those massive runs, or be able to kind of fight those off a little bit better against Iowa State. But if you can get Maryland, then keep it close against Iowa State, like that's improvement. That's a good stretch. But Maryland is a can't lose game in terms of metrics because they are not good in terms of where they're at in the metrics. And that would just not be a nice, you don't want to start Big Ten play 0-2. That's like number one, you know, thing. Like you cannot start Big Ten play 0-2. And I think you need to keep some of those, bad losses off your resume as well. And, Maryland would be a bad loss at home right now. Like I think Maryland's got some good pieces, but, from what they do and, how they've kind of struggled, at the rim or, defending the three is kind of where they've really struggled. And I think Iowa, if they can knock down those outside shots, that's going to be big. But from a matchup standpoint, it's going to be really fascinating to see how Iowa can kind of combat that. And, you get that one, that's a big plus. And then Iowa State, now you have that experience going to East Lansing, going to the Breslin Center, but it's not going to be an easy test in Ames.
We'll close out talking Hawkeye women's basketball. We'll be back with more Hawkeye. I'm Dave O'Hara in just a few moments.
If you want to go faster this spring to capture that additional yield, protect your seed when you're planting early. Here's Ben Pieper, our product manager.
Choosing the right seed treatment is extremely important for high yields. Merschman Starting Line and Starting Line Plus seed treatment offers multiple modes of protection against diseases that can infect your soybeans. Couple that with high-yielding soybean genetics. You're off to a great start when you plant early.
Contact your local Merschman Seed dealer today and find out about Starting Line and Starting Line Plus soybean seed treatments. From Merschman Seeds, your friend in the field.
Welcome back to Hawkeye with me, Dave O'Hara. Pleased as always to have Sean Bock joining us. Kind enough to join us for the whole show. Took a deep dive into Hawkeye football recruiting and where they might possibly go bowling in their season as a whole. Sean and I covered that in the first segment, Hawkeye men's basketball in segment 2, and now we close out the show in segment 3 talking Hawkeye women's basketball. Sean, the 8-0 Hawkeye women ranked 12th in the country. In the AP, depending what poll you look at, Iowa State is number 10. We'll get into that in just a moment, but what a game it was against Fairfield. Fairfield got some votes in the top 25, so this was no laugher. They made 18 three-pointers, Fairfield did. So they handily won towards the end, the Hawkeye women did. But this game was a little bit more than some fans thought it would be, and looked like initially it was a bit of maybe a Thanksgiving malaise, but Hawkeye women prevailed in the end. But we've got to stop and start with talking about Ava Hayden. My goodness. She's having double-doubles, I said to you off camera, the way Caitlin Clark was having triple-doubles. She is having one heck of a start to her sophomore year, isn't she, Sean?
Yeah, she's been fantastic. I mean, one of the big pieces for her too is like she's been consistently good around the rim. She's finishing 71.4% of her shots at the rim, and that's really efficient, especially when you consider how much volume she has at the rim as well. And her defensive rebounding ability has been fantastic too, and the way she can get after on the glass. And not only that, but she adds such a nice element with her rim protection, how she's able to not only be a rim protector, but she's really good in ball screens. Like she's really agile. She runs the floor. Like there's just so much that she does that makes her a really, good piece. Like I don't want to say, she's more skilled than Megan Gustafson because Megan Gustafson was incredibly, gifted with how, her post moves and her up and under. But I think when you're talking from a complete package and just kind of total size and, versatility and just like two-way impact, like Ava is kind of, in that next group, like I think above Megan a little bit in terms of just her overall play, and how she's able to impact the game on both sides. So she's been phenomenal. And the fact that you can kind of play her and Stokey a little bit more together, I think they're kind of still figuring that out a little bit, but that's a really good asset for this team.
Looks pretty favorable for the Hawkeye women to get a win on the road at Rutgers. And then, Sean, then you get into the rest of they still got to play UConn, as you and I talked about a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
So not only Iowa State looming big next week, but the week after that, a little more than a week after that, then they play UConn. So this they're going to have a pretty good idea of what they've got going into the rest of the Big Ten schedule. Then they got one more Big Ten game as well before they go into the rest of the Big Ten schedule in January and starting in January. But Sean, things looking good so far for the 12th ranked Hawkeye women team, but a lot of tests ahead of them.
Yeah, so many pieces that they have with this group. I think you talk a lot about the depth of this group and, kind of just figure out where things are at, who fits with who, getting people healthy as well, like Chit Chat, right? I mean, she was incredibly efficient to start the year. Losing her obviously stinks. We'll see what kind of the status is there. And then Emily Rodriguez as well. She really seemed to be coming into her own, looking more comfortable in some of those early games. So if you can keep everyone healthy, I mean, you got a really good, solid depth with this roster. And I think that can really, pay dividends in Big Ten play, not just, because you got a lot of pieces, but you can have a lot of pretty, favorable matchups or kind of, work things out matchup wise.
Sean, fantastic stuff from you as always. We had early commitment day today on December 3rd with football, and well, the portal will be opening, and you'll have that covered for us as the recruiting specialist for CBS Sports 24/7 Sports, also beat writer covering the Hawkeyes. Folks, there he is, Sean Bock. I know you got so much stuff to get to, Sean. It is always great to talk to you. Could go on and on and on. Thank you so much for taking time, especially for the whole show and a deep dive into all three teams that we wanted to get to with Hawkeye football and recruiting and bowl season, but also Hawkeye men's basketball, women's basketball. Great stuff from you as always, Sean. Thanks so much. And we'll talk to you after the holidays. So an early Merry Christmas and an early Happy New Year to you and the viewers.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. You as well.
Truly my pleasure. Folks, there he is, Sean Bock. I'm Dave O'Hara with Hawkeye. I also want to thank my production partners at BettorEdge and BettorEdge.com, Greg Kajewski and James Siles. And to you, the viewers, I'm Dave O'Hara with Hawkeye. That's all from me. Thanks to all of you.